Let's dive right in. So we've been covering Disney for a while. It's one of my favorite companies, huge fan. And Josh Tomorrow has been there for a few months now and has kind of started revealing more of how he's thinking about the company and where he sees it going. And so two moves this week kind of sketched that out a little bit more for me. One was that they announced a partnership with TikTok to bring fan-made TikToks into Disney Plus. So creators who opt in will get access to all of Disney's full IP library to build content from. And this is kind of a big change, right? So they had previously talked about having their own vertical video service called Verts. And this seems to be kind of like an in-between of that, where they'll just kind of just be working with TikTokers directly, focusing on Verts, which makes sense because why would you build out your own platform for this when there's already a very established one that's already, successful? But the main question is, how are they going to get creators to, go on there? The other thing to think about is just he's very well known for being aggressive IP enforcers in the entertainment business. So how is this going to work of allowing people to use their IP? How are they going to keep that, level of craft and like making sure that their IP isn't ruined because creators come and create content that isn't on brand for them? Particularly here, as a parent, I would be concerned about what's being made and whether there are going to be some controls to make sure that, kids who are probably going to be huge, like Disney, plus, watchers of this, aren't given content that they shouldn't be watching. But it is an interesting thing for creators to think about, right? Because this is opening up this whole world of Disney IP when there are so many creators that, already have affinity for the brand. So would love your thoughts, Shannon. Obviously, you're huge into the, creator economy and how creators, see themselves. Is this like a thing that's on your radar?
I mean, it's definitely a surprising development, especially as you mentioned, Disney. I mean, when it comes to brands, it doesn't get more protective than Disney. So much so that, social media experts, when they were giving out advice in terms of like how to protect yourself from being like filmed in public, because that's a big
Yeah.
worry, right? They would just say, yeah,
Right.
play some Disney music, which
Uh-huh.
it will
Yeah.
not last on the internet for very long because
Yeah.
it was so aggressive about
Hmm.
protecting their brand, and totally understandable. So to have this sort of flip where it's like we're actually going to open up our IP for usage because we're recognizing that creators really power public opinion, and we've reached a point where there's really no point in fighting the power of creators. I think that shows that there is you have this legacy brand that technically doesn't need to modernize per se.
Hmm.
When you have like a rabid fan base, you don't and it's working, they don't necessarily need to change. But the fact that they are is really commendable. And the fact that they are recognizing that creators do have this inherent power, I think is really smart, especially because so many other brands have capitulated to just the power of user generated content, so much so that they build their marketing strategies around it.
Hmm.
Just last year, we covered a rebrand from Domino's. They were redoing their boxes. There wasn't necessarily a need to. Sales were up, sales were fine, but they said that we wanted to make our packaging user generated content friendly. That if people were filming from drones, if they were filming from far away, our branding would be noticeable because we understand that our marketing team can't necessarily do it alone. So Disney kind of following suit and recognizing that creators should be welcomed into the fold, I think is very smart. And as a parent, I echo those concerns. It's like, well, how do you keep that control? How do you make sure that this safe hub for of entertainment for our kids remains safe? I don't doubt that they will figure out a way.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, they definitely don't want people, creators to ruin, their brand and their IP. We've talked about a lot on here how HBO Max and Lionsgate last year have been one of the first to like modernize their own like marketing process because they realized how creators were creating fan cams and trailers and their own art that was bringing in views and, creating interest for the shows, right? Like, there's that Creed edit that like went viral. All the HBO like fan cams. There were I think one of the stories that we talked about here was that a creator who had created a fan cam for Heated Rivalry got hired in-house at HBO Max. And like how cool is
Right.
that like you're actually rewarding your biggest fans, but then also the people that have like imagination and can create really cool stuff based on your IP. And then, Lionsgate started hiring people in-house from like, that were creating these fan cams, realizing that like, hey, this is how we're getting views, right? And so we've slowly started seeing all the streaming services, most prominently Netflix, start trying to figure out a way for them to create another, like, vertical videos based on their shows in order to attract the younger demographic that maybe doesn't want to sit down for like a full Netflix show, but is willing to watch these like fan cams or trailers or small, like shorter summaries of the shows. I mean, I'll admit I've gotten caught into some rabbit holes on like Twitter of like Netflix shows that I'm never gonna watch, but I'll like, watch the like 3-minute video of like what takes place, And then there's some that like remind me like, oh, I actually do want to go watch that movie again or want to go watch. I mean, this whole thing during the with the Odyssey, right? Like there were so many Oppenheimer fan cams that I'm like, oh, I want to go back and watch Oppenheimer again.
Right.
So it's like this new way that like people are realizing that that's getting them to watch these, movies or TV shows based on like the streaming service because fans are putting together these like, snippets or summaries that like companies would be dumb to not jump in on.
Right.
One thing though that I do question is like what happens to creators when something goes viral, right? Like, is Disney gonna incentivize that with their own revenue share, right? That's like a huge thing for TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, right? Like, creators want to know that the stuff that they're creating is actually going to be valuable, not just for the company, but for themselves, right? They don't want to be putting in all this work for nothing, right? So, where is Disney going to sit on that? Any thoughts on that, Shannon?
I mean, that's exactly it. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, when you talk about Disney, there is this sense, or specifically Disney fandom, there is this sense of like magic. Like we're welcoming the fans. We're allowing the fans to explore their creativity. And in the way that the framing, it's almost as if we're saying, like, we're welcoming you to our IP. You're welcome. And, that's great. And I'm sure that there are fans that would love that. But the reality is that the creator economy is a very, very powerful thing. And, creators, of course, they are fans. And Disney has a history of working with creators pretty extensively in welcoming them into the fold. And I'm sure that equals amazing perks, like being invited to exclusive events, being able to hit red carpet premieres. But the reality is that creators are also businesses unto themselves. So the question is going to be, are you treating them like fans or are you treating them like business owners, which they are? And like, as you mentioned, lots of work goes into scripting, concepting, filming, editing, packaging something so that it's quality, and also not only making sure that you are aligning with this brand that you're partnering with, but also that you are doing right by your own brand. So there's a lot there that equals like, hey, I hope this multi-billion-dollar company is offering
Right?
reasonable compensation. Like, yes, open up your IP. Let's, do TikTok dances with Tigger. Would love that. But I also have bills to
Has that
pay.
come out yet, or is this a Shannon original?
And you know what? Give me like 2 months to figure
Yeah,
out that
right?
technology, and I will make my dream come true. I promise you. But like, imagine all of the work that has to
Yeah.
go into these things, and then they get to basically, I mean, I have not seen the contract, so I can't say for sure, but I imagine that if they are opening up their IP for usage, the trade-off is that they get to use this content in perpetuity and get to use it for their own needs and what have you. So the question becomes, who then owns this content? Who has ownership of this? Is the person that created this thing for you getting paid handsomely? Because let's face it, you are saving a ton of money, not having
Right.
to hire a marketing team or an outside agency to build this thing for you. So like you have to look at it beyond, being allowed to use this once highly protected IP. It's once you use it, once I'm able to use it, what's in it for me once I create all of this yummy, yummy usable content for you.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm sure all the other streaming services are going to be keeping an eye out for this, right? Because they're all interested in getting user generated content, especially if it's, going to bring in the views and it's not as expensive as hiring a full team. So that takes us over to the other bold move that he made. So Spider-Man Brand New Day has broken records. I think they're reaching actually a billion mark today, which is like the fastest that, any movie has done it. And one thing that Damaro did, which I immediately like glommed onto, was that he, tweeted, he goes, "It goes without saying that the success of Spider-Man bodes well for our other upcoming and highly anticipated Avengers Doomsday film." And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, do you really want to peg one with the other? Because, like, I mean, you're setting up Avengers Doomsday to either be just as good as Spider-Man Brand New Day or to fail so abysmally and to have your words thrown back at you
Yes.
because you said this. Like, why would you do that unless you know that the movie's going to be good, or you're just so like trying to get people to just buy the tickets anyway, and then, come what may, on the other side, you'll just have to deal with it if it's not that good, because it's just, very bold to be, saying both, right? Like at a time when people already are having their doubts, right? Like during Comic-Con, like people were just like, I don't know, like the trailer looks like CGI and like AI, like, none of it like looks that good. So yeah, the fact that he said that, I'm just like, why would you even set it up to such a like high bar
Yeah.
when like you didn't necessarily have to, you know?
Yeah, it was curious. I will say it did remind me of vintage Marvel, like back in the day when, SDCC was like the breeding ground for all of these sort of interwebbed, no pun intended, like sort of like interwebbed and interlocked entities coming together. Like there was individual excitement for the movies, of course, but there was the overarching excitement of seeing how these things are going to ultimately connect and mesh together. But a lot of time has passed since then.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you mentioned, San Diego Comic-Con, and like that was part of the problem, right? None of the female leads were at Comic-Con. They're already up against Dune 3 for like the release day. There were AI visuals in the trailer. And like Spider-Man, I mean, I just talked about this recently, was like, I think one of the big reasons why Spider-Man did so well is because Tom Holland separated itself from like the Marvel machine by pegging
Mhm.
it more towards Christopher Nolan and everything he learned while filming the Odyssey, right? Like he came out and he said, when I, not only did I sign up for the Odyssey and like tell Sony to put Brand New Day on pause, but after, reading, Christopher Nolan's script, recognizing that was one of the best I've read, and then like seeing how Christopher Nolan works, when I went back to Brand New Day, there were like a couple scenes and the script that like stood out to me. And I was like, this isn't good enough. And so we stopped production, brought the director, Daniel Destin Craig and then Zendaya together, and we rewrote it, right, with the Challengers writer, and then went back and filmed it, right? And so by saying that during the Odyssey promo tour, for me, it's a way for him to say like, no, 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 I learned what an actual good story is and a good script is from Christopher Nolan, took those learnings and changed Spider-Man Brand New Day. Expect that to be a good film. I'm staking my reputation on that. And we're not getting that similarly from Avengers Doomsday. So it's making, like we already kind of think that that's not going to go that well. So that's why I think it's like interesting that, Tomorrow is like putting that, together, when I think it's kind of too late to do reshoots, to do like anything to change it. So like he must have already seen it, I would think, which is
I
kind of
should think
crazy.
so. Yeah, I think it's a really, really big hook, hang your hat on, and there's a lot of risk there. And I understand that he's in a position where he has to sort of prove his worth. Yeah, like stepping out, you have this natural spotlight on you. There is this natural pressure to be like, hey, the old Marvel that you remember, the thing that used to sort of stop box offices, we're bringing that back. And obviously, here's proof of that. Even though he's not taking into account, like, yeah, a lot went into that film being the hit that it is, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the current machine, as you mentioned. So, yeah, you've got to sell tickets, but you also have to look at the reality of the situation and be like, yeah, this movie is probably doing really well due to some outside factors that we had no control over. Now,
Yeah.
naturally, he can't
Obviously
say,
doesn't want to admit that.
yeah, like he can't just come and be like, yeah, this wasn't us.
Well,
But
but what's funny is he still could have been like that this is a Bob Iger thing. I'm bringing this into this, and
right,
I'm going to help promote it as much as possible. But after this is when I'm really going to step in and like have this be a Josh Tomorrow Avengers Marvel, movie.
right.
But he's not doing that.
Yeah, that's the move that I would have done personally. Would have been like, oh, super excited for this thing that came in well before me that I don't have
Yeah,
to do.
exactly. Right? Yeah, he could have separated himself from it a little bit more. So I
Yeah,
think it's super interesting because this has also been like the year of like great theatrical experiences. I just saw, I think it was Discussing Film that posted a thing saying that Spider-Man is going to be the fifth movie that has made $1 billion. The Super Mario Galaxy movie, Michael, Toy Story 5, Spider-Man Brand New Day, and The Odyssey. So that's, already five movies that have crossed like $1 billion mark. Right. But even in terms of theatrical experiences, right, I'd throw in Project Hail Mary, Obsession, all these movies that are bringing people back to the movie theaters, right? And
yeah,
usually Avengers would be one of those, right? Like I definitely expect it to make, a substantial amount of money just
sure,
because it's the Avengers and it's
right.
IP. And I get all that, right? And it's also kind of setting up at least the next film that people say is bound to be a lot better because there will be more characters. And obviously, the characters that were introduced in Spider Man Brand New Day and the whole X Men series is going to be introduced a little bit more into that next Marvel film. So that would bring people back. But it also gives, tomorrow a perfect opening to be like, this one's a one off. We'll see how it goes. But the next one is the one you really, want to go into. So I
Yeah,
think it's either going to go down as one of the most confident CEO moves of the year or be one of the most quotable when it does end up going wrong and him staking his, reputation on this.
best of luck.
Awesome. Okay. So a couple of lessons here is that the biggest IP holders are eventually going to have to deal with the creator economy, right? Like we've slowly seen that happen with movie studios and TV studios like Lionsgate and HBO Max. Now here's, the biggest IP holder out there, and that's Disney, right? And it's not just, Disney characters, but that I'm sure is going to include Star Wars and Marvel, if not this bout, but eventually, right? Especially since both of those, Marvel and Star Wars, are seeing flagging attention, to their IP, right? Star Wars, the last movie, Mandalorian and Grogu, didn't do that well. So what's a way that they can be, having fans create, new visuals or ideas, right? One thing that could be really interesting is what ideas might come from the fans directly, where it's like, a lot of fans or creators have like really good ideas of like where you could take the story next. And I really hope that they start listening to the fans that are like that want to see more of that innovation and creativity in terms of the story and plot, and not just default back to like the same old Skywalker saga or
Mm,
characters that we already know. Like the fact that Andor has was ended up being such a good story. Like I really hope that they go more in that direction and give us those like different stories that aren't just a rehash of the things we've already seen. And I think many of us want to see that in Marvel and Disney as well, right? Like yes, Toy Story 5 reached 1 billion, but that's from what I've heard, I haven't actually watched it. The story and the plot itself wasn't, the greatest or as comparable to Toy Story 1 and 2, right? And
yeah.
Moana obviously was, Moana live action and Moana 2, which were both released in the past 2 years, didn't really reach that scale that Disney would have wanted, right? So maybe there's, some new ideas that they could be getting from from fans who like still love Disney and like all their IP, but want something different.
Yeah, I'm hoping that this sort of rolling out the welcome mat for creators to kind of play in the sandbox does lead to a realization that maybe there is some need to replenish the well with new ideas and new stories. Like, we love our Toy Stories. We love our Marvels. We love our Star Wars. But there are so many interesting stories to tell beyond, hey, let's do a live action version of what we've already seen. So and you see, other platforms turning to creators because they recognize that there is additional talent there. Like If you are a Love Island fan, then you saw that this TikTok creator Teffy, who's known for digging into pop culture and specifically the romantic dynamics between like dating and how it shows up differently in pop culture. They recognized that and then they made her like one of the hosts of After Sun, which is like the big after show for Love Island, which was like one of their biggest streaming properties right now.
Hmm.
So there is so much potential in that sort of creative collaboration that I do hope that they open themselves up to that and don't just stick with, what can you do for us in terms of like this, these old faithfuls that we don't want to like change in any way. There's just a lot of potential there. I hope they do explore it and I hope they explore it fairly.
Yeah, one other thing that just reminded me of is what we're seeing in horror, right? Where it's like you're having directors who are making these movies, right? Backrooms, Obsession, Iron Lung, really small budgets, and they're selling millions of dollars worth of, movie tickets and like creating these like worlds. And it's so interesting. It's like those came from creators, right? On
Right.
YouTube, right? Those all kind of created those ideas there, built up audiences, and then came into the Hollywood system. So it's like, could there be some sort of program like that for Disney to start working with creators and then helping them scale up into, being part of like the Disney machine of creating new stories or, being animators or, there's this whole other world of like finding talent through this pipeline and then bringing them into your system. Like, I hope, Disney wisens up to that and brings, smart, creative people into the fold and
And
just
not
doesn't waste them as resources.
right. And not to like, give out too many free ideas here, but in a time where we are seeing creative communities really fight against, like the intrusion of AI in these creative spaces. Here's an opportunity for this big billion-dollar company to lead the charge and say, we still believe in human creativity so much that we are willing to invest in it and, give them a platform to, as you mentioned, scale and, create these incredible things with our resources. There's
Hmm.
just a ton of opportunity here that like if they are smart and willing to relent a little bit of that sort of control over, what fans get to see and what stories get to be told, then we could be witnessing a whole new era of Disney creativity coming in.
This would be a great marketing story for them, right? It's like you get, this would be a Cinderella story. And isn't that just what
Yes.
Disney is supposed to be about, right? Is like finding those people and then building them up. Like, imagine that.
Imagine,
The narrative
imagine.
speaks for itself, right? That's Disney magic right there.
Exactly, exactly.